for us, it's about how are we meaningfully bridging the connection between you and your 5-year-old? And part of it's knowing what's going on, but there are other things like, what if, I have a 9-year-old, he chats with his friends from school online, through online games. I'm cool with that. It would be amazing if through this interface for KID connected products, you were able to see, guess what? Your kid did these amazing things today. They went and supported their friend doing this. They, were helping other people they met online in this particular online game. They were teaching them how to do something, a new skill in this game.
They had these obstacles that they overcame.
Exactly. Now you've flipped the script.
Welcome to the latest episode of the Norders Podcast. Today I'm with Kieran Donovan, the founder and CEO of KID, and the only person I read to have ever been named Privacy Lawyer of the Year multiple times. Kieran has advised some of the world's most well-known online platforms on how to architect solutions to efficiently navigate emerging regulatory challenges across the world. You've been featured in major press including Forbes, Bloomberg, TechCrunch, and VentureBeat, to name a few. And KID, the company you founded, is based in Singapore that protects and empowers kids and teens online by enabling games and services to easily create age-appropriate experiences for any user, any age, anywhere in the world. You guys are all about protecting young users and not telling them what they can't do online. It's about empowering them and discovering what they can through age-appropriate experiences. Whew. How about that? Anything else to add?
No, that's it. We are looking to reframe the way the internet empowers kids and teens online. We think that's it's a market that is there, and there isn't really a space for kids and teens in a lot of the online environments that we see. So we want to be able to power that.
I have not seen this approach before. I have a 5-year-old. And I'm born in the mid-'80s, so sort of not born with the digital environment we have today, but sort of it started existing when I was young. And as a father of a 5-year-old, my initial reaction was that I'm just going to ban everything. Like I'm going to full control. She has no word to say. Then I came across KID and ooh, it's sort of so obvious, but how did not I think about this before? But before we jump into that, your story is quite unusual for a privacy startup founder as well. You want to walk us through that a bit?
Yeah, I think it is unusual, and even the startup we built is a little bit unusual. We can talk a little bit about that as well. So, my background is I'm a lawyer. I'm an attorney. I've been a licensed attorney for about 15 years. I've traveled all around the world. So I started practice in Sydney, just as data was becoming a hot thing. This was before all the changes in Europe, and that had just kicked off. And then eventually went through the rite of passage. I moved to London, practiced there just as the European reform was kicking off. And then an opportunity came up to move out to Hong Kong to build out the data and tech practice at the firm. And so I did that. I took that leap, built out the practice from scratch, and over the course of 6 years, turned it into something I was really, really proud of. But I think the key thing was when you're building something from scratch, I was almost building the practice, the startup within the law firm. And obviously that gives you a huge advantage because you've got all the incredible structures and support, but it really is building a business from nothing. And so I think for me, it was the case that I came across a number of clients in that particular region that were looking to go abroad. They were looking to launch global products, and they wanted one person who was going to sit there and come into the office and say, hey, this is how you go to market in the US. This is how you go to market in Europe or in LATAM. In the same way you think about when I go to market for my online product, I have to localize language and payments. I also need to localize compliance. And so that was kind of my role. And eventually it sort of reached a point where I saw an opportunity to build a tech company that could actually do that.
How planned out everything has been from the get-go. That's very fascinating for me when reading about your background. You did not mention you were also a screenwriter in New York for some years and then living across the globe. You're from Sydney originally as well.
Yeah.
So how did you see as a young kid in front of the mirror, I'm going to be a screenwriter, then a lawyer, then a tech founder? How did these pieces come together?
I was always ambitious. I always
Mm.
wanted to, I was dreaming big.
Mm.
And so right throughout high school, I was really into the writing. I'd written a number of stories. I then graduated and started writing novels and then started writing screenplays. So by the time I actually started college and university, I had probably a dozen movies that I'd written, the scripts that I'd written. And that was the vision. And I almost as a courtesy to my parents said, all right, I'll do this law degree because I need to have a legitimate degree in addition to the writing. And so I did that with the expectation that I was going to graduate from law school and go and write. And so that's exactly what I did. It turns out it's incredibly challenging to make it in the entertainment industry as a writer. I had an amazing experience and I'm so grateful for it. But what it meant was I had this year where I was just there grinding. I was grinding. I was writing. I was submitting. I was flying. I was meeting with agents. I was meeting with producers. We were making a lot of things. We were filming a lot of things. Obviously, you're getting paid nothing. So it is very sort of startup mentality in a way. I didn't realize it was training at the time, but it was a similar sort of mentality. And then eventually, I went back to law because I needed a job. Right? There's no sort of way around that. And it just so happened that now that I look back, I think that creativity, that grind, that yes, every day I'm going to have to put this effort in. No one's going to do this for me. I think set me up really, really well for what would come later on.
So a startup founder advice, have one creative experience in your back pocket doesn't hurt.
I think it definitely, the creative piece, when you got a blank page in front of you and you have to create something, you hear about getting into flow and lots of things that people talk about in terms of that sort of creative mindset. For me, it was, how do the dots connect in the gray matter when I'm constructing a story and when I'm building out that narrative and I've got characters and you sort of structure things in a certain way, but a lot of it is just on instinct. And so I would kind of wake up every morning and read what I'd written, and I'd be as surprised as anyone about what happened. Because it was almost like you're in the zone. And so I think what it set up for me was discipline in terms of get up, work, grind, get that out.
Oh, it's just not going to happen otherwise.
Exactly. But don't be too attached to it. Come back the next day. And if you don't think it's right, if you don't think it's up to scratch, there's no harm in saying, okay, I'll take those bits. I'm gonna ignore those bits. I'm gonna start again today. And I think that meant that I was never, when I eventually came into building a startup, I was never sort of super attached to a particular idea. I was always like, the best idea must win out.
So almost discipline over quality, if you may, even that sort of, I'm going to put the work every day and eventually my brain's going to start avoiding shit. And I think that's the approach I've always had too. And I've heard both of the advices. I'm a big fan of Ryan Holiday, for example, and he's all about like, I'm not going to finish the sentence before it's perfect. I only write perfect sentences and I never rewrite. And so I find what works for you kind of.
I think that's it. Yeah. For me, it was, provided you don't put that expectation on yourself that it has to be perfect and you're willing to come back the next day and do it again and make it better, then it just frees you up. And so you can work 8, 10, 12 hours today, grind something out. Today it's product for me, but back then it was writing stories and building what we were doing creatively and coming back the next day and saying, actually, do you know what? That doesn't work. So we're going to do it better today, but not being afraid of that sensitivity.
That's powerful. So then towards law, was it then something about entrepreneurship or the blank page and the love for it to start something of your own and sort of taking that route? Or
so it definitely persisted. Having had that experience writing and building that and having that vision of what I wanted to be, that not working out. So I think partly it was, I don't want to say failure, but it was the experience of things not going to plan and then going back to the backup plan. And so that was humbling, but what it did was it didn't take away my appetite for the grind, my appetite for
ambition,
and all those things. Yeah. And
what was your mindset like? Did you feel like a failure at the time, or?
I think at the time I was more worried about paying my rent. But at the time it was very much, okay, I've had this experience. I'm just going to accept that this will play out somewhere down the road. And I think it was this. It's kind of insane thinking about it now, but having this faith that at some point this experience will become relevant. I don't know how, I don't know when, but just have faith that this is going to play out in the way it's meant to play out. And so for now, we're gonna take that experience, we're gonna put it on the shelf, we're gonna go heads down on this, and then maybe this comes up again. And looking back, I can definitely see that synergy.
Yeah. So how did then the law sort of experience start playing out? Was that clear to you? Also, did you have a clear vision about that part of your life then?
I think not initially. So initially I wanted to be a litigator. I wanted to argue in court, and I loved that experience of being on my feet and doing that. I found it actually quite creative because you're always sort of thinking about if you're, cross-examining someone, how do you get them where you want to be? And so I really enjoyed that. And I thought that was where I was going to be right up until a year and a half in, when I started doing tech and data. And there was a spark that went off, which was, wait a minute, this is what I do. Like, this is what I read about every day. This is what I do as my hobby, as I enjoy, is this area. And it's now, I could see that it was becoming relevant. Data was becoming relevant. The whole privacy thing, it hadn't quite kicked off, but you could see it kicking off.
And it was messy as
it was
back
totally,
then.
Yeah, exactly. And so seeing that, and I think for me, what was attractive about that was it was brand new. And so whereas with traditionally lawyers, the law goes back a long way, right? And so,
a really long way.
Exactly. So you're coming in and you spend a decade training, and then you make partner, and there's a long bit of service that you put into it. For me, going into data, this is brand new. Nobody knows it. The law is new. So I got to stake my claim on it and build something. And so for me, it was seizing the opportunity. Yes, this is new. I'm going to be the thought leader in this space. And then it eventually seeing the opportunity, given everything that's going on in Europe, to move over this side of the world, get that firsthand experience, and then just take the opportunities as they came.
How did the idea for KID come about? You mentioned you worked with sort of similar type of startups at that time. Did it come from the field, or where did the
It did. It definitely did. So I was doing a lot of work with folks like Tencent. And you have big game publishers that are based in Asia that are launching huge games, huge titles globally with hundreds of millions of users. And you're dealing with localization of, like I was saying, language, payments, customer support, all these things, and compliance. I was the compliance bit. And so I developed this mental map because I just ended up triaging everything. It was, there's something going on in Brazil, there's something going on in the UK, there's something going on in Japan, whatever it was. And so I ended up with this mental map. And whenever you see a problem that is really expensive to actually traditionally solve, which was like global compliance, launching online consumer products globally, being compliant everywhere is super expensive, really hard, takes a lot of time, and then you have to keep it current. Like, that's the way.
Yeah, it's not do it once and then you're done with it.
Exactly. So you look at that problem and you think, okay, well, at some point is going to solve this. There's going to be a system, some tech system, and you're going to pull in, and it's kind of like a certification, and it's going to allow you to go and do this. And I waited 2 years for someone to build that system. And eventually my idea kind of honed in a little bit, where given all the online safety, tailwinds, everything that's going on in terms of, all the sensitivities with kids online, I thought, well, that's a contained area, particularly in the video game industry, because you think, okay, that is an area where lots of games say 13 plus, there's lots of younger audiences. And so there's a real interesting opportunity to go in and say, well, but what if we could have it all ages? The audience is already there, but what if we enable to bring parents into that experience? What if we now unlock the experience for those users? We made it better. We made it something where they could build their community. They could connect with their friends without the fear of their account being...
And connect with their parents too. I think that for me was the real cultural connect there that we tied it all together.
Exactly. So that it all kind of gestated because of that. That's what I was advising on. And then productizing my job.
Yeah. How was the launch? How did you go about starting KID? What was that like?
So it's super boring. So the way that a lawyer goes about starting a startup apparently is you de-risk it by going and meeting with a lot of regulators. And so I had this idea and I thought I'm going to go meet with as many regulators or former regulators that would take a meeting with me. And so flew to a bunch of places and just met with them. I'd have coffee. I'd chat with them about this idea I had. All of them were super supportive. A little bit surprised and probably a bit shocked that a private practice lawyer was even thinking about doing this, but they were very, very supportive. And so that told me that if I did this, I think there's going to be some regulatory support there. I think it's something where it's doing a real service to the regulatory industry. And so did that, previewed it with a handful of clients that I thought, you could use this. This would be something. They were very supportive. And then we went about through a lot of my own money at building a prototype. My co-founder, who was a good friend of mine, so we kind of put our money together, built the prototype, showed that to show what this experience would look like, get all the wonderful feedback from that, and that then put us in a position where we could get our first term sheet.
So not the least traditional sort of startup, talk to potential clients and the network around it, and And for context, so this is a year and a half ago,
right?
Or something. So it's fairly like maybe sort of the way I was mentioning, it's like, oh, it was 5-10 years ago, but it's all been really fast. And you had a successful A round already.
We did. So we did. So our initial, we had a few term sheets, and we ended up pitching A16Z Games. So we weren't a US based startup. We were based in Singapore and Asia. And so raising from a US VC is very atypical, particularly at the early stage. We had a few term sheets from the local market, and we thought, why not? Why not just put this on the radar of one of the big US VCs? And so that's what we did. We caught them at, I think, the exact right moment where they were going through the process of selecting their Speedrun 2 cohort. And so that was their 12-week accelerator program. You fly into the valley and you do that. And so they said, hey, you guys could do this. This would be awesome. And so we agreed that. So that was our pre-seed. And then immediately when I went back out to tell VCs, hey, we've raised this round, all of a sudden we were this tiny little Singaporean startup that had come from nowhere that had raised from Andreessen Horowitz, which sent like an incredible signal out. And so we got lots of offers to do a seed round. So we did a seed round immediately. That was led by Convoy Ventures, which is a awesome game VC based in the US, and then Turtle, which is another game VC, and Ben, who runs that fund, is amazing. And so that sort of played out, and that gave us the capital to say, all right, we got a year and a half to figure this out and how we build it out, and sort of that kind of started the wild 12 months that we've been on.
What's the focus right now? What's going on? What's on top of your mind when you're not doing cool Finnish podcasts or attending Slush?
So we're very focused on the clients that we have started integrating with and learning as fast as we can through those experiences to make the product the best it can possibly be. So, we've gone live in a number of games, a number of big games. And we've got a lot of big games that are going to go live with the technology on the platform next year. We're getting a lot of cold inbound now. So we've got a lot of game studios. We're getting inbound from education. We're getting inbound from lots of different areas of the world where they're looking to do this in the right way and say, hey, I want to be all ages out of the gate. I don't want to do this 13 and up, 16 and up stuff. I want to have like the full audience and bring parents in and do that. That's a lot. There's a lot of stakeholders to manage. There's a lot of inbound. And so we just have to make sure we focus right now and deal with each integration in a really intentional way to make it the best player experience, because everything is different. We're integrating in VR, we're integrating in like Steam PC games, we're integrating in mobile, like hyper casual titles where you're dealing with advertising and monetization, all completely different things. So it's the same core engine, same core product, but the experience for the player is very, very different. And so we're learning really, really quickly how to do that in the right way.
And you've been global first from the beginning, right? So there's a lot of also local laws that you have to navigate with at the same time.
It's wild.
Yeah.
So when we first started, I said to my co-founders, hey, I want to start a mailing list where I send out a newsletter once a month. And it's just a list of like really simple, these are the changes that have gone on in the world this year. And we had this discussion 14 months ago. Is there going to be enough content for it? Like, really? How often does the law change? It doesn't change that often, right? It turns out the law changed a lot. So my last one that went out a few weeks ago, we had something like 24 changes. It was wild. And it's all over the planet. Like, everything's changing. We had 2 countries change the age of a child last month. We had 3 countries.
That one would imagine would be sort of standard by now.
Right. And it moves because all of a sudden, like, some new regulation comes in. It's like, oh, actually, 13 doesn't make sense, 16 makes sense, or 15 makes sense here, or 19 makes sense for this context. So it's moving very, very quickly. We have an amazing team that stays up to date with it. We feed that into our engine. We have an incredibly careful process we use to push those updates and make sure we're not pushing updates where a regulation changes and now all of a sudden, it suddenly bumps the age limit up, and there can be player impact. I'm going to be super sensitive and thoughtful about how those changes get passed. But that's why our startup is so strange, because we're half engineers and half lawyers.
So from sort of growth management terminology standpoint, you're currently maybe focusing then more on account or customer management instead of new customer acquisition. And so a lot of inbound, taking that with caution, seeing who are the right partners to move forward with. How big is your current how many games are there now that you have an integration with?
Good question. We had a whole suite come in last week, and they're all going live.
So there's new ones coming too.
Every week. Every week. So our total pipeline, we're talking to hundreds of game publishers, from big AAAs through to indies, venture backed, all sorts of things. Talking to a lot of. I think there's a lot of interesting disruption in this space where a lot of people our age are coming into this space with young kids and saying, well, I know what the experience was like for me. I can fill my over 13 checkbox. That doesn't really make sense. So how would I build my product for education or AI or whatever it might be? But I want to do this in a way that's inclusive of the younger audience or teens audience as well, because a lot of things are 18 plus as well. So I think there is clearly a moment in time where I think there's a shift in the mindset of the people who are building products for the next generation, and we're now getting to power that at the engine level.
And the mindset shift is especially towards it being inclusive now, instead of narrowing it down for it.
I think I agree. I think so. If you've asked me 12 months ago, I would have said it's the regulatory pressure. It's the big fines. It's the headlines. It's all this sort of thing that's pushing products toward how do we deal with younger audiences, whether it's younger teens, tweens, or younger kids. I actually think that it's different. I think that it's the mindset of people like us coming into this where, we're Gen Z, but we've got kids. And our mindset is, well, I don't want to stop them necessarily. I want to empower them, but I want to know what's going on. When I'm paying for things, I want to understand what's going on with that. And acknowledging that they will build a lot of their identity in their community online. That shouldn't be in a box.
Yeah.
And it certainly shouldn't be in a world where they have to pretend that they're
doing something else.
Right, exactly.
You mentioned that law is moving now really rapidly. Do you see it moving more rapidly, or do you see now maybe perhaps some standards coming to place and speed could slow down eventually? Which way?
I think it's going to move pretty rapidly for at least the next few years. And I think, as we saw with a lot of privacy regulation, you get that sweeping reform, which is what I would call the early adopters of the new regulation. And we're seeing that in online safety. We're seeing that in content moderation and areas like that. And then there's a pause. And then you start seeing enforcement of that regulation. And then you have the second wave of adopters. And so you see governments in other parts of the world say, okay, we've looked at what different countries have done, kind of like this thing in Europe, we like this thing in Australia, we like this thing in Japan. We're going to pull this together and build out a regulation based on that. And so I think we'll see a very, very similar thing play out.
A set of terms that I saw across when I was doing research about you is the state of regulatory challenges. What's the state of regulatory challenges? What's going on?
It is immense. I'll give you a really specific example.
Okay.
So I'll give you a really specific example. If I was to tell you that if you were to say, Kieran, I want to launch a product, an online product, maybe it's a new online game, and I want to go live globally next Friday. And my question to you would be, okay, so is it all ages? And you'll say yes. And so I'll say, okay, so how do you deal with chat when it comes to younger audiences like kids chatting to adults or teenagers? And you're going to say, oh, I haven't thought about that.
So that's a regulatory challenge right there.
Exactly. Or I might say, hey, have you got randomized rewards in your game? Have you got loot boxes? And you're going to say, well, I do. Some of them are cosmetic. Some of them are gameplay impacting. Then I have Compo Gacha. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, they're all different threads of regulation. And then you might say, well, I have in-app purchases. I have season passes. Maybe I'm like ad monetized as well. All these different things. And each of those is a different thread in terms of the regulatory challenges. And the reason I kind of use those examples is, let's pick one country, and let's say the United States is an example. We would take that bucket of issues for the game you're launching, and we would say, okay, so let's feed in all of the data for under 13s, because that's one bucket, that's one segment of users. We call that a digital minor. Now we've got teenagers, which is anyone between the ages of 13 and 17. And that's a separate segment of users. Chat needs to be default off in the US for teens. Kids under the age of 13 need a parent to flip it on. Above the age of 18, you can have chat on by default. So we've taken those features and we've mapped it to those different user segments. And now if I was to tell you, what if the age of a child and the age of an adult is different in 117 different countries? And you're going to say, how do I do that?
So that's KID then, and your tool can help.
It'll do it in 10 seconds.
Nice. What's next for KID now that you have, you mentioned what's going on right now, focusing on really making the player experience now as great as it can be. What's next coming up?
I'm getting excited about this next wave of creators that are looking to be inclusive. And the reason I'm getting excited about that is because it's not reverse engineering a game or a social experience or online video to try and adapt to a younger audience. It is putting those first principles at the very beginning of the ideation. And that to me is super exciting for us because it goes beyond the compliance piece and more into game design, more into, okay, how do you deal with social features within some of these online games, social spaces? If you want to be inclusive of kids, are you attaching a parent here? What about if you have a kid who is with, Nana and Granddad on the weekends? Do you have something on Nana or Granddad's iPad where they can see certain things? How do you deal with context-based permissioning? We're starting to move our way through those issues, which for me is where I get really excited. It moves beyond the compliance piece and more into this is going to impact kids and teens in their daily life in a good way, and bridge those connections with their parents and grandparents and teachers and everything else. That's what I get excited about right now.
So do I understand correctly? So inclusive game design is then that it doesn't mean that everything in the game is also for children. It means that we can now control what part of the game a child in a certain country can see and their granddad and grandma can see and take part of.
Yeah, we think of it. So we ban the word parent controls in the company. And we think about it as family connection. And so for us, it's about how are we meaningfully bridging the connection between you and your 5-year-old? And part of it's knowing what's going on, but there are other things like, what if, I have a 9-year-old, he chats with his friends from school online through online games. I'm cool with that. It would be amazing if through this interface for KID connected products, you were able to see, guess what? Your kid did these amazing things today. They went and supported their friend doing this. They, were helping other people they met online. in this particular online game, they were teaching them how to do something, a new skill in this game.
They had these obstacles that they overcame.
Exactly. Now you flip the script, right? And you're going to go there and you're going to say, man, this was a black box to me. I didn't know what was going on.
Yeah, unless they came and showed you, which happens less and less, I hear.
Exactly. And you start following that thread and you're thinking, well, what if part of that is sharing clips with you? What if part of that is you're seeing their positive impact on the community online in your interface? And so you're now going to say, this is great. And also, I want to be part of it.
That's cool. How about with you? You've mentioned you travel a lot, big travel plan now after Slush as well. What do you like to do with your free time?
Free time. That's such a novelty for an early stage founder.
Your face. Whoa, I've heard that word.
I mean, I have 2 boys, so for me, they consume a lot of my time in a wonderful way. I taught my youngest how to ride a bike over the weekend. I say taught. He taught himself. Yeah. He knew what he was doing. I do play a lot of games with my 9-year-old. So on Friday night, I was back in Singapore for a little bit, and we had a games night together, and
nice.
so we were playing. So downtime with the kids and my family is a big priority for me. It is a challenge with all the travel and everything that's happening. But even this morning, so it was snowing, and so I was able to show the kids, hey, this is what's going on. That's cool.
Yeah. And it's been your first 24 hours now in Helsinki. How did you spend your first day? What did you do yesterday here?
I arrived at 5:45 a.m., flew Finnair, which was great. And it was a wonderful experience and hit the ground running. I was in meetings all day. We had a number of side events. So I got to hang out with a lot of founders. Every car I take, I say this not in jest, every car I take, every car I get into, it is a founder who is telling me about the big thing that they're building. And I love that. It cool. happened from the very first time I got into the car at the airport and came here. And for 28 minutes, I heard about the business that this lovely woman is building, and all of how she's taking everything she's building in university and she's putting this. And I just thought, this is unreal. This energy is unreal. And then I had a wonderful dinner last night with a number of founders and a lot of folks, homegrown founders who built big companies here and done amazing things. And so getting to chat with them and learn from them has been amazing.
And you have it's not a keynote, it's like a fireside chat you're doing, you're on stage.
Yeah, so we have a panel. At Slush. So we're main stage at Slush, which is amazing. I'm super excited for that. Talking about these issues, Kids Online, with Tammy from Roblox and Ricardo from King, and Moritz from Lightspeed. Lightspeed led our Series A.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. We're happy to have you in Finland and at Slush, your first time here. And I hear Slush is just getting bigger and bigger. So as you guys grow, this might not be the last time.
I'll be back.
Yeah.
I'll be back. No, I've loved it. It's fantastic. I'm excited to do the ice plunge and the sauna and everything.
Are those going to be planned for tonight?
Today. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
After the panel.
Yeah, it's a good thing we're doing this before that.
Yeah. Not fully red-faced.
Yeah.
Man, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. This is really cool. I'm inspired. And let us know in the comments, as you're supposed to do with podcasts. If you have any questions, I'll forward them to you and we'll see if we get an answer back.
Sounds good. You will.
Thanks.
Awesome.